Check 1, 2. Sweet. This does work. Fresh batteries. So if I'm over here, I'm pretending slide. Awesome. That'll work. Sweet.
So he said it works just like regular. Just hit the arrows and it'll go. It'll go right.
If I hit either arrow, or should I hit the one on the right?
Right arrow goes forward.
Okay, all right.
I guess there's a pointer on there too. Is that what the red is? Oh, there it is. They won't see it back there.
Check 1, 2. Yep. So if people wanted to come up, they'd use this one, unfortunately, because that one's got something going on with it, high pitched squeal. We can't use that one.
Okay, so are you saying we call people for comments?
Yes.
We'll have to,
Yes.
okay,
If people want to comment, they have to stand here, otherwise I
Okay.
won't hear them on camera.
okay, all right,
This is too much of a risk with the other microphone.
okay, that sounds good.
Check, 1, 2, good.
Okay, everyone, we're going to get started. If you'd like to have a seat. I see Mayor Bob back there greeting everybody. Well, good evening and welcome. I'm Monona Mayor Mary O'Connor. I think I know most of you. I'd like to welcome you to tonight's final San Damiano Public Information Meeting. Tonight we're going to present the final plan, and then we've allowed some time for comments and questions at the end. And if you'd like to speak, ask a question, or just leave a comment, please complete one of the forms on the table over there. There's a basket you can leave them in when you're finished. So, just starting out, I think, okay. In September of 2020, the Monona City Council made a unanimous decision to purchase the historic San Damiano property, which is something a lot of people in the city have dreamt about for years. The city took possession of the property in June of 2021 and began working towards initiating a master planning process, one that would involve input from the entire community. And a few things had to happen before we could start that. First of all, the Friends of San Damiano was formed, and they committed to raise the funds to pay for the planning process. The city and the Friends agreed to a memorandum of understanding delineating how their relationship would work during that time. And the Friends went on to raise $143,000 to pay for the process, and they've continued to fundraise to defray the cost of the purchase and maintenance of the property. In the meantime, the City Council established a San Damiano Steering Committee approved by the Council and co-chaired by me and former Friends President Andy Kitzlar, which helped to lead the master planning process. Members of the steering committee, several of whom are here tonight, if you want to just stand up briefly when I call your name. This is a little weird because we don't have, unfortunately it's not a PowerPoint, so I'll do as well as I can here. Wes Mossman Block, who's the current Friends President and Deputy Director and Chief Operating Officer of the Wisconsin Historical Society. Alder Nancy Moore, a Friends Board member, and she's not with us tonight. Alder Doug Wood, Parks Board Chair. Mayor Lee Gorman, former President of the Clean Lakes Alliance and a community member. Rebecca Holmquist, member of the Monona Landmarks Commission. Kyla Beard, a representative of the Ho-Chunk Nation. Tony Gomez Phillips, Park Board member who replaced Kelly Slack midway through the process, and Jesse Starr, Monona Grove School District representative who replaced MG School Board President Lorene Gage midway through the process. The committee began meeting in September 2021 and has met over a dozen times since then. Among other things, committee members provided their input on the planning process and helped with the search for a consulting firm to help facilitate it. In May of 2022, after conducting a series of interviews, they recommended that the city hire MSA Professional Services. The City Council approved an agreement with MSA in June of 2022, and planning began in earnest that July. Since then, the committee has met on a monthly basis with MSA to help guide the process. I'd like to thank the committee members, Parks Director Jake Anderson, former Acting City Administrator Mark Hotaker, and current Administrator Neil Stick-Schulte for your commitment to the planning process and all you did to help move the San Damiano project forward. And now I'd like to turn the mic over to Dan Williams of MSA, who will reveal how the master plan was developed. There we go. And you can
participate, does it?
No, it does not want to participate.
Whoa, it does take off real fast. Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming out. I know it's not the best weather to be out and about. So, as the mayor mentioned, we began the process in July of 2022. So I'll go over these first initial slides to tell you about what the process was to come to the master plan. And I know some of you, or most of you, have been to the previous public information meetings and seen a lot of this stuff. But our initial work was a site analysis, and then we started engaging the public and getting your thoughts on what would be good at the site, and then developed concepts for the site. The site analysis, what that took in account was the trees. The trees are a significant portion of the site. So the two images on the left are actually data that we collected that's in a geographical information system, GIS. We tagged all the trees, so when you're out there, you'll see little metal tags on the trees, and we identified them. So those two diagrams are from 2022, and we haven't updated that, even though the city has removed some of the dead trees. But that's easily to do in the future if the city wants to do that. The upper one in the middle is slopes, and then we had a traffic analysis. That's the one on the bottom middle. It's traffic counts on Monona Drive and Winnequa Way. And then there's soils and wetlands. Also, we started to look at first, the timeline of the project. As the mayor mentioned, we started in July of 2022, and you can see over the last 18 to 20 months, we're now in 2024, and we're at the very end of the master planning part of the project. The master plan document itself will be available on the city website. We still have some minor tweaks in the document, and it'll be up sometime soon. It is up now? Okay. And so the next process is it goes to council in February, March. That's the diagram on the left. That's our process for the master plan. The diagram on the right is in the document itself, and that's the timeline of the site. The blue bar is the Ho-Chunks being on the site for thousands of years, and then it translates over into the green bar, which is the recent history that most of us understand and know, and that goes back to the Alice building his house and then turning it over to the Norbertines and then to the Friars, and then as recently as 2015, grad students living in the house. So it's kind of a real quick history of the house in the land. So the public engagement, we did that through community surveys online. I hope all of you took those surveys. We had focus group meetings, these public information meetings, stakeholder interviews, and public committee meetings. That ultimately culminated in themes for the master plan. Those are in green. So there's history and culture. So a big part of that site is the indigenous history of that site. There's some records of mounds in the area, not specifically on the site, but definitely going towards Old Brick and on around the lake. There's nature and peaceful is another theme. We all like the natural setting of the site and the quietness of it. Accessible to all, that's a main feature that the Friends and the city would like to carry forward, that this be a very accessible park for everyone. And that also includes multimodal transportation, so you can come by car, bus, and those sorts of things. And then also the connection to water, because it is the last large piece in the city of Monona that's on Lake Monona. So then we developed three concepts. A was what we call the historic reuse. So in that concept, the Alice House was preserved to become something in the future, some use for the park. And then the park elements were developed within the park. Concept B we called minimalist, because that concept, we removed the Alice House and we replaced it with two small shelters, one with a restroom facility in it, and we lessened the impact of cars on the site. So there's two small parking lots and utilization of the existing driveway. And then the concept C was what we called the modern park, because it removed the Alice House and replaced it with a new structure that could serve as a community function, some type of community function. So that was the difference between the concepts. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Andy to talk a little bit more.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. Let's see here. Before we take a look at the final master plan, I want to take an opportunity to just review our vision, the steering committee's vision and goal statements that we laid out. And again, these are guiding principles that were informed by not only community feedback, but also the city's priorities. And then ultimately, they were our guideposts that the committee used for our decision-making and the elements and the overall direction of the final plan. First, as you can read here, and for the sake of just getting it, settling it into ourselves, I will read it, but our vision statement for San Damiano property is to create a sustainable and serene natural lakeside destination, offering recreational, cultural, and educational opportunities for people of all ages and abilities. We feel that this was the essence of all the feedback that we received, whether in person or in writing, and is also a good direction for the property to be a sustainable and enjoyable property for generations to come. Our vision statement, excuse me, while general, guided us in establishing 5 official goals for the property. Oh, there we go. And just to remind ourselves of what those goals are, first, to create opportunities for recreation, education, and community gathering throughout the year for people of all ages and abilities. Preserve the natural environment and tranquility of that currently exists at San Damiano. Increase public access to the property and to Lake Monona, both from land and from water. Honor and share the full history of the place currently called San Damiano. And then, sorry, this one's cut off here. There we go. Then the final one, sustain and support property improvements, ongoing operating costs by leveraging philanthropy and revenue generating opportunities. So as we move into sharing the details of this plan, the final plan, you'll see that these goals are laced in every decision that we made to improve this property to be a destination for all people. As we can see in the final plan, after all the community feedback, and again in writing and in person, the data compiled, and with the goals in mind, we found consensus around a number of items and elements that are included in the final plan. I'll highlight just a few of those. For example, the parking and creating access points, like Dan said, for multimodal transportation. A lot of the feedback was to put the parking closest to Monona Drive. Paved and alternative surfaced paths, so all people have access to the natural beauty that is this property. Outdoor gathering areas, and in the document, they are termed nodes. An example being an outdoor classroom. Natural play areas, not thinking of the typical park playgrounds. Open lawn space, you'll see throughout the property, that can also serve as event space. Property access for motorized and non-motorized boats, canoes, and kayaks. So not only do we have the dock that you can see, but then we also have a landing beach for the non-motorized. Shoreline restoration, native plantings and gardens throughout. And finally, a 4-season facility serving as a community gathering, education, and event space, which could be accomplished through the current house or a new facility, which we'll touch on in a little bit. You'll see in the plan, hopefully everybody's been able to review online, that there's actually 2 plans. 90% of the plan is all the same. The pathways, restoration, gardens, parking, etc. You'll see the facility is the only change. And we worked with MSA to think about that and to make sure that there was little disruption to the other elements as we think about both facilities. What I will do is now pass it actually back to Dan, who will talk about our cost estimates and our methodology behind that of all these elements of both plans. And then we will, again, touch on the facility in a little bit.
Thanks, Andy. As Andy mentioned, we worked around the 2 buildings with the master plan. And not only to have the 2 plans, but also to phase the project so that if the house were to go away for some reason, that wouldn't stop any of the site development to occur. So the two plans, and let me move this up real quick. That way you can see the cost for the two plans side by side. And again, as Andy mentioned, the site itself is the same. It's just the buildings that are different. So what we're calling the master plan has the Alice House in it. And you can see down at the bottom, phase 5, phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. When you look at the document online, you'll see what we mean by those 4 phases. And basically, we don't know how this will proceed in the future. It might be totally different than what we have in the master plan. But what we did was break it down by starting from Monona Drive, working back into the site towards the lake. And so you'll see those 4 phases, and that's all site work. But then phase 5 is the standalone. That's the building, and that can occur at any time. So you can see the difference. What we did for the cost estimate is we use costs that we do for building a project and working with a contractor. We were talking about this just a little bit earlier. You'll probably have a lot of volunteers out here on site. So these costs might not ever reach this height. But we have to have a starting point. And we have to have a place that the Friends can raise money for to help create this park. So you can see the two. There's about a $3 million difference, a little bit over $3 million, or a little bit less than $3 million between the two. Now the building, that's the big component that's different between the two. So the Alice House restoration, we have been working with local contractors and then national projects that are at the same scale. And that's about $6.5 million based on the square footage of the house, which also includes some improvements that need to occur to the front of the house for it to be National Register, a potential of making that National Register. If it does, then there's a potential of having some tax credits for that, and Wes might talk a little bit more about that. We also included a patio cost because you would want to have some outdoor facilities around the building for larger gatherings, and then some site work, landscaping and that sort of thing. And then we have to include erosion control because anytime we work on a building, we have to have erosion control around it, and then mobilization for the contractor to get their equipment in there. We carry, at master plan level estimations, we carry high contingencies because we're way up here right now thinking. We're not into the details and into the weeds of the project. So 20% seems high. We usually use 25% at this level, but we felt like, well, 20% is a fair enough assumption. And then design costs, what that means is the architect or the engineer, their fees for the project. So you can see the house restoration could be around $8.7 million, somewhere in there. A new facility, we figured a 6,000 square foot building, and I'll show you some comparisons next. And we used a high number there, $715 a square foot. That's on the higher end. So we're at $4.3 million. And then we have to include house demo with that one because the house would go away. So we're using costs for demolition on house structures of square foot value. That's where we got the $210,000. And then again, patio, site work, mobilization, those sorts of things. So you can see that came in around $6 million. So the comparable projects that we use to help us establish a square foot cost on a new building are the hillside at Plowman Park in Appleton. It's a Outagamie County park facility. It just opened this summer. It cost $5 million to build, but it's 2 stories in height. So it's a little bit higher cost because of those 2 floors. It can hold 200 people in the main room. It has a full kitchen and restrooms. So I want to go backwards a little bit. What we were talking about through this whole process was creating a facility that could potentially house or occupy 100 to 150 people. So that facility is a little bit bigger than what we were talking about for San Damiano. But there is the thought of having a full kitchen so that you can have those types of events at the building. The other building that we use is Lapham Lodge. It's currently, they're in fundraising for it. They're at their budget, so they're going to start construction on it. The budget at September 2023 was $2.6 million. It's 5,000 square feet, so if you do the math on that, that's about $515 to $525 a square foot. The reason that we went a little bit higher to $700 a square foot, that's their beginning cost, and the contractors will have change orders as they go through this. That just is the nature of the business, so that cost will come in higher than that at the end of the day. That building will have 150 occupants in it, a kitchenette, so it won't have a full-size kitchen that we're talking about for San Damiano, and it has restrooms. But the building itself is something that could definitely fit on the site at San Damiano, because 5,000 square feet is not all that big of a building. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Wes to talk a little bit more.
Another reason you want to have these costs at the higher end at this point is you want to exceed expectations instead of come in over budget. Okay, so we want to spend a couple minutes and talk about why we're bringing two options forward instead of making a decision. I think maybe some people would have expected us to make a decision about what was going to happen to the Frank Ellis House at this point in the process, because that question has been certainly front and center throughout all of the community engagement and the surveys. And you can see here, I'll summarize these charts here that you probably can't read. We asked a couple times throughout the process how people felt about the Frank Ellis House, and some people feel very strongly in favor of keeping it. Some people feel very strongly in favor of demolishing it. But I think overall, most people, when we presented those three concepts, there was a minimalist option, the option for the Frank Ellis House, and a new facility. Most people marked the two options with a facility as the most desirable. The steering committee, recognizing that whichever option we end up with will need to be funded through private resources, we really focused on the question, why is a facility essential to the ultimate master plan? Why is this an essential investment? That's the case we're going to have to make. And we concluded that the facility is essential to to really advance the goals that Andy talked about, to create opportunity for year-round gathering on the site, to provide amenities that are going to drive and increase usage of the park, to create a venue for educational opportunities and partnerships, and to generate income to help offset the park operating costs. And through our planning and analysis, we determined both options were feasible and could achieve these goals. We also recognize that the master planning scope of work, the work we've done to date, would not answer all of the questions, the essential questions that we would ultimately drive an ultimate decision. So we have to do more work. We have to, refine these budgets. We have to develop a facility program. We have to get into the concept design, and we have to really test the feasibility with donors. So that's all work that needs to happen, and really we don't want to rush forward with that decision. I think it's also important to understand both facility options bring some complexity. For example, a new building, if we were to move that direction, we'd have to do additional archaeological study to know for certain whether we can actually put a building and dig in that spot. So that's an important thing to consider. And if that path moves forward, we're going to have several years of the Frank Ellis House sitting there, and decisions, and have to make decisions about what to do in that interim period. With respect to the Frank Ellis House, you saw those numbers, which are sizable compared to a new facility, perhaps. But Dan mentioned the tax credits. We spent a lot of time looking at is it possible to restore the house back to a condition where we could make it eligible for the National Register and therefore apply for tax credits. If we're successful doing that, we could. That's almost 40% of the project costs that we could get back. That's over $2 million. And so when you look at those numbers, all of a sudden they become a little bit closer and makes the decision a little bit harder. So in summary, we're recommending that we keep both options on the table at this point. We recommend that a four-season facility is in the plan. It's essential to meeting our vision and our goals. There's two viable paths forward. More studies needed before we can make a decision. And both of these options are going to depend on private donors. And so engaging, further planning and feasibility with the donor community is critical at this point. Mayor.
I'm going to talk a little bit about next steps from the city's perspective. The steering committee will meet one or two more times in the next few months to finalize the master plan, and it will then be presented. I'm sorry, I should have advanced the slide. Thank you, Andy. It will then be shared, it will be presented to the City Park and Recreation Board as well as the Landmarks Commission. It will then be presented to the Monona City Council, which will be asked to accept and approve it. The council will make any final decisions as to what happens with the property. Assuming the council approves, implementation of the plan will be phased in over a period of 10 to 15 years. This is going to take a while. The city's already committed taxpayer dollars for the purchase of the property, and we've received over $2 million, or $2.25 million in grants towards the purchase and anticipate applying for more. The Friends have committed to fundraising for any improvements to the property as well as continuing to pay for annual maintenance and upkeep. Once the council accepts the plan, then the city will work with the Friends to revise our memorandum of understanding to help position them for successful fundraising and the implementation of the master plan. As we look forward to successful implementation, the steering committee has had a lot of discussion about the best way to deliver the project and the right business model moving forward, including types of public-private partnerships. Based on the expected reliance on private donations for capital improvements and operations, I expect the steering committee to recommend to City Council that San Damiano operate differently than other parks in Monona. Our new city administrator, Neil Steck-Schulte, has been very helpful in thinking through these issues with the committee. Unfortunately, Neil is ill and can't join us tonight, so I'm going to share his remarks with you as well. The acquisition of the San Damiano property is a unique opportunity for the Monona community. The investment will allow the public to enjoy this asset for years to come. A key element to successful implementation of the plan is the approach to entering into a public-private partnership for the operation and maintenance of the property. The city will continue to own the property with the intention of partnering with the Friends of San Damiano to maintain it and eventually construct and operate a facility for educational, recreational, and revenue-generating opportunities that are consistent with the goals of the plan. This will most likely be achieved through a master lease between the city and the Friends of San Damiano that allows the Friends to seek out other business partners that could sublease space to generate revenues. There are a variety of examples of how public and private partners interact on similar projects, one of which is right here in Monona, the Aldo Leopold Nature Center. The city owns that land while Aldo Leopold leases it long-term and owns and maintains the building, and the property itself continues to be available to the public and open to the public. There are several benefits to this implementation structure from the city's perspective. The city retains overall control of the property through ownership and subsequent leases. A master lease or other agreement defines the goals, objectives, and responsibilities for the city and the private partner and establishes procedures to ensure that they're being met. The private partner takes on construction, maintenance, and operational responsibilities, which reduces the city's costs and allows staffing resources to be focused on other city facilities. The arrangement can help accelerate fundraising and increase competitiveness for grant funding by engaging more stakeholders. The Friends of San Damiano is already covering the cost of maintaining the property. Last year, through December 7th of 2023, their support included $17,750 towards park staff hours, $11,927 for contracted services and supplies, and $1,400 for utilities. City staff is projecting that the annual operating cost is going to be somewhere between $25,000 and $35,000 each year, and the Friends are committed to covering this cost. The city needs to address major investments in both staffing and other city facilities in coming years, making having a viable private partner critical to moving the San Damiano master plan forward. Now, Wes is going to talk a little bit about the Friends' perspective.
Yeah, so from the perspective of the Friends of San Damiano Board of Directors, the completion of the master plan is just an essential milestone for the future of the property. It provides a clear vision for San Damiano, a clear set of phases and priorities for future investment. And as we look forward to the rest of 2024, the Friends are really going to be working in parallel tracks. In the short term, we will continue to provide quality community programming on the property, and we will be raising money to support the park's ongoing operating expenses. And at the same time, we'll be preparing for the future implementation of the master plan. We have a lot of work to do with the city to renew and redefine our relationship moving forward, and this is so essential to create a viable and sustainable delivery method and a business model for the park. We cannot go out and secure major support without having these details understood and a good plan in place. We need to be prepared to answer all the questions that we can expect from people wanting to make significant investment in our plan. And to that point, we will continue to work together to advance those discussions in the coming months. Based on these discussions, we'll be focused rapidly on building the capacity of our board of directors, the capacity of our organization, and beginning the first steps in planning for a major fundraising campaign. Master planning costs alone are just one part of the puzzle. There's other costs, soft costs, that are going to come with this. So developing a comprehensive campaign goal, identifying naming opportunities, building the necessary infrastructure, all will come in the coming year. As so many people recognize, the San Damiano property is truly unique. It's an incredible asset, and thanks to the city's investment, it's now a public asset. The master plan will largely preserve this space as natural and peaceful for all to enjoy while creating amenities that will drive usage, community engagement, and recreation. As we turn the page to our next phase of work, I remain just extremely optimistic about the capacity of the broader community to support the vision and the effort that we have in front of us. Hundreds of individuals have made contributions of their treasure and their time in the past 3 years to make our efforts a reality today. I also want to reinforce the importance of planning well, not rushing into decisions. For years, the property has remained in the state that it's in today. When it comes to big decisions like surrounding the facility or do we take the house down, let's make sure we have all the right data. We've made put all the right thought into it before we make decisions that we can't undo. So the Friends, and on behalf of the Friends of San Damiano, I look forward to a continued partnership and work with the city ahead as we try to make our shared vision a reality.
Thank you, Andy, Wes, and Dan, and even though Neil is here, he helped put together the PowerPoint, so I appreciate that as well. Before closing, we've just got some thank yous. I'd like to thank, first of all, the residents of Monona and the Madison area who have been so supportive of this purchase. Dane County, which gave us the $2 million conservation grant, and the Wisconsin DNR for a $249,000 Knowles Nelson grant. The Friends of San Damiano for their support for the master planning process, all the activities they've planned and supported at the site, including numerous tours of the house and grounds and a variety of events, all the historical information they've gathered, their newsletter, website, Facebook posts, and everything else they've done to help us spread the word about San Damiano. And that's all done on a volunteer basis, so we really appreciate that. Ho-Chunk tribal historian Bill Quackenbush and other members of the Ho-Chunk Nation who have provided their insights and knowledge of the time their ancestors spent on the property, and everyone else who's contributed their time, talents, and money to the property. And on the city side, I'd like to thank the members of the steering committee, the Monona City Council, including those members who stepped down since we purchased the property, former city administrator Byam Gatto, current administrator Neil Steck-Schulte, finance director and former interim administrator Mark Hotaker, community media director Will Nimau, and his assistant who's helping us here tonight, Brennan Hekimovich, director of planning and community development Doug Plowman, and last but not least, Monona Parks director Jake Anderson and his staff, who among other things have taken over ongoing maintenance of the property, as well as both sponsoring their own events there and helping the Friends with theirs over the past few years. So let's give them all a hand. We've allowed some time for questions and comments. If you haven't already, please fill out one of the forms on the table over there, And if you'd like to speak or ask a question or leave a comment, in the interest of allowing everyone who wants to speak to do so, we'll be limiting comments to 3 minutes if we have a lot of them, I guess. So I don't know. I'll go over and check it, and if anybody wants to, Andy, are you going to check that? Is there one piece of paper there? Looks like Lindsay has another one. Okay.
Here you go, Lindsay. You're not afraid of a mic, are you? It's okay.
I'm not afraid of the microphone. So I have a question for Dan, and it has to do with the money that you have listed on the screen for the different options. Because the numbers you have there are different than the numbers on the PDF on the city website.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah, I can answer that pretty easily. So like I mentioned before, I didn't think it was up on the website because we still have some edits. So this version is a little bit different than the version that's online. $3 million. $3 million. It might be in the House because there was a discrepancy on how we covered the contingency on the House. And it was a big number. So it is a big number. Yeah, it was a big number. But the numbers that we projected tonight, or we're showing tonight, are the actual ones that will be in the final report.
Okay, so what I have written is based on the numbers that are in the report, where there's a $6 million difference and not a $3 million difference. So I'm not going to give you my whole long speech. What I'm going to say is, to me, it remains incredibly clear that the House should go, that we need a brand new facility to open up the best view of the lake in the Capitol, which is blocked by the House. Give ourselves a new meadow, give ourselves a beautiful new facility, and give us a place that we can make some, that we can make some money through the rental of the property. I think it's very clear, and I hope we really, really, all as a group, take a strong look at that. And to my friends who feel totally differently, sorry about that.
I'm going to move around.
Just need to thank and recognize all the city staff, time, and volunteers, and city, lived here 30 years, and when Harrison Russell would go to the pool for 20 years, and Winona had a pool for those 20 years, and he needed a pump, and it was gated. We got a new pool the next year. We got a great library. Everything Winona does is just fabulous. I had a thought for the house. It's 2,600 square feet. That's not a big building. Consider the idea of an RFP to give the house away. Winona has a vibrant business community on Winona Drive. If somebody would be willing to move the house through 100 of the demolition cost, the Friends put up 50, and say, here's a free house and 150 grand towards moving it. And ask for, they could, if they got commercial zoning, used as a restaurant, could be used as a multi-tenant antique store, which, how many are there? Well, there are a few around the city. It's just a thought of combining, using the house, keeping the synergy of the business district and Anderson University. The other thing I was thinking about is the public, the building you want to use. The house is 6,000 square feet on 3 floors. You couldn't put 100 people, you couldn't put 40 people in a room with rooms that are in the house, whereas your new building, you could accommodate them, but you have to park them. And you need to really look at where the building is relative to available parking to use it. I mean, I guess that's one thought.
Thank you. So, I just had a couple questions. So I'm Ann Allstad, I live on Whitaker Road. So my first question was really about this same thing, the square footage, and whether, do we know the maximum square footage we can get out of a new facility versus the square footage in the existing facility when it's renovated?
That's another great question. The house, Wes, the house is 9,200 square feet, but it's 3 floors. And so the point was, a good point, that it's small rooms. So it could be renovated in a way that there could be a larger gathering space. I forgot to mention Quinn Evans Architects on our team, and they actually just won the AIA's National Firm of the Year award, so they're a really good restoration firm. And so they've worked on these types of facilities before, and they've made them usable spaces. So I think it can be done. It's just like Wes mentioned, that is the next step to program and come up with a program for a building, whether it's the house or a new facility. And then the new facility, we were looking at those comparatibles that I mentioned, and it was based on that number of occupants, the 100 to 150. And through the dialogue that we had with the public and then the dialogue with the stakeholders, we came to agreement that that was a good number to work with, that 100 to 150 people per facility. So that 5,000 to 6,000 square feet would house that amount of people. Now the difference there is whether the building, like the Hillside building, has 2 breakout rooms in a large room. So at this point in time, you don't know if you need 2 breakout rooms, 1 breakout room, or 0 breakout rooms. So that will fluctuate the size of it if you go to a new building.
So just a couple more questions. If we renovate the existing facility and it gets us maximum square footage, are we concerned that to keep the historic parts of it, we're required to keep certain interior walls such that it makes the space less usable as the kind of space we're looking for?
Wes, do you want to answer that one?
I think that's the exact right question. So I think it's why we focused on the goals for our facility, because whatever program we do, whatever architectural study we do for the facility, the existing house, it's got to meet these goals. So if we say we need gathering space for 100 people, well, we better show an architectural plan that has a space for 100 people. I know that when we've had the discussions about the National Register, the key aspects have been the exterior facade. So the house, bringing it back to its 1890s condition, representing being a good representative of the Georgian revival, I believe, style at that time. So those are the main considerations. I think we have a lot of leeway with what happens inside. There's been a lot of changes over the years, but these are all the exact right questions and the additional study that needs to happen. And I don't, if the answers turn out to be no, it doesn't meet our needs. I think it's answering the question for us. But right now we need to, I think that's the study that we need to put into it.
Do you have another question?
Almost done. This one's more fun. I saw on one of the last slides that you were going to make the naming of the facility or the park an option for, I think, a donation, I assume. We're considering changing San Damiano to potentially be something else? Is there anything already in the running?
Andy, or okay.
I think the basic answer is that the committee is going to recommend changing the name, but we don't have any ideas, suggestions about the name right now. Some of it may depend on fundraising. We're going to have to see how that pans out. Otherwise, I could see us having some kind of competition or something where people suggest names and see how that goes. We do, I guess the main thing to know is that we do plan to change the name, but we don't have an answer for what it's going to be at this point, but it will certainly most likely be involving community input, except for this fundraising option. And
it could also be that, you know, if we're fundraising, somebody will maybe donate money to like a room in the new building or something like that. It isn't necessarily that we'd be renaming the entire park after someone. But again, that will just depend on how the fundraising goes. And we haven't been able to really start fundraising in earnest because people like to see, these organizations and foundations like to see a master plan, and that's a big part of the reason why we did this process over the last year and a half. Sue, did you have a question?
Hi, I'm Sue Carr. I live right next to Damiano. First, I'd like to say that I really appreciate all the work that everyone has done. Everyone, it's amazing. It really is. Second, I'd like to say that I 100% agree, like I usually do, with my friend Lindsay Wood Davis about that house. That is the best view of the lake and the Capitol and everything. And when I looked at the master plan and I saw that the facility that would be built would be further down, yes, away from my house, but also away from the beautiful view, I was completely for that. My question is, who's going to decide about the house and the facility? As I understand it, these guys are done, the steering committee is done, so how will that decision be made between the two options?
Well, I think it's going to depend on what our research shows in terms of what kind of what we need for the program that we plan on having there, and that will give us some numbers. It's also going to make a big part of it is going to be if we are eligible for the National Historic Landmark status, because that makes these tax credits available. If that doesn't work out, and that isn't definitely a guaranteed thing, it's going to mean redoing the whole front of the building, taking chunks off to make it look like it looked in 1894. If we don't get the historic tax credits, that will be a big part of the decision, because it's a couple $1 million that could be worth in terms of renovating the building. So, but the ultimate decision is the city council's. The city owns the property, and all the final decisions will come to the city council. Once we do further research on both of the building options and see what the different fundraising opportunities are for each, then the council will get that information and they will make the final recommendation or decision, I guess.
I think the only thing I would add to that is that as we move into discussions with the city about the next phase of the relationship between the Friends, we need to have discussions around what's the next planning phase for the building. So I think there's more discussions to be had, more feasibility assessment with respect to donors, and that's going to be a major input in a final decision.
I really appreciate all the work everyone did, and that you purchased this property, you know, for everyone to enjoy. I just wanted to make a few comments. I really enjoy sitting right behind the house and enjoying the beauty of that spot. And you mentioned the peace, tranquility, and serenity, or what everyone wanted. So I'm a little bit upset about a pier being there, because the noise, all that activity, and that's right where everyone sits to enjoy that view of the Capitol, where everyone takes photos, and then instead there's going to be a pier there. So I'm a little upset with that aspect. I mean, everything else I can see as wonderful. Just with the trees, I know you've been taking down some, and that some others will come down. I don't know if you could possibly always plant a tree for trees that are being taken down, because that is a lot of the beauty of it, is the trees for me, more than prairie land or because that's really a beautiful part, and it adds to, the environmental aspects, to have that, taking, what trees do for the environment. Well, I said on the survey, I really like the house. I do like the house, but it's probably not very usable for, all the things you want. And that hillside building is very beautiful, I have to admit. So just wanted to say that while I wrote, I like that the house to remain, maybe it's not the best idea. In terms of naming the park, I mean, I like what you did with, and I don't know if I'm saying that right, that Wickabock, Bay, that renaming, I like what you did with that. And I mean, maybe the park could have a name similar to that, or let the native people select a name for the park. So those are just some ideas that I have about it.
If you don't mind. One thing I'll quickly add to that is we've been purposefully not making property improvements in the last 3 years as we take down trees or different things like that, because she brings up a good point of wanting to make it natural and have trees and not just take down trees. But we wanted to make sure that we were mindful of whatever this master plan was, because we would hate to plant a tree, find that we have to move it, 3 years down the road or cut it down or different things like that. So we do have, that in mind, the environmental aspect of it. But I just did want to point that out, that as we take these trees down, we've been mindful not to replace them because we wanted the master planning process to play out. Additional questions, comments?
So just playing off the pier aspect again, I see I just brought it up online here, but if you wanted to change it up there so everyone could see the proposed master plan. I'm not sure why we didn't choose to put a pier by the rocky beach part. I know that most of the boaters that are there are all in that shallow water, and the challenge, I think, for the boaters is being able to use the facilities, like the restrooms on the park property. And if you're in the water and having to walk through the rocky area by the beach, because it's really rocky there, you're not going up there with bare feet. So if the pier was actually over in the shallow area, people could swim over, walk over to the pier, get on the pier, and walk up barefoot. Just a thought on the pier part. And that way you wouldn't have to have it right in front. I don't know if you wanted to comment on that, because I do have another question.
I was just going to ask Dan, because there was consideration of kind of depths and allowing motorized boats to actually access it depending on the depth of it.
Yeah, exactly right, Andy. So you can see on the diagram the different tones of blue in the white lines. Those are the bathymetry, or the survey of the bottom of the lake. So if we had a pier open to everyone, that would include sailboats. And then I used to be a member of the Monona Sail Club, so I've got a Flying Scot. My centerboard would hit. The only way that a sailboat could get there is where the pier is at. They can't go to that shallow part of the water. But that's not to say that it should be open for sailboats, but that's the thinking behind it, that the pier would be accessible for all boats, motorized boats, or boats that are not kayaks, canoes, and paddle-up boards. And another question?
As part of this plan, is there any, because this is all about the park itself, but is this group responsible for any of the planning on the actual Monona Drive, like the changes that are going to be required on Monona Drive to facilitate biking and walking to this place? Because it's actually pretty hard to navigate to on foot.
Well, we do have a sidewalk on Monona Drive along there already. I know that this has come up several times over the past years, would like to have extended that wide bike path that's going through Over Park through Monona. Unfortunately, until we get right to San Damiano, we don't have any right-of-way to allow the city to do that. So there is no room between like Cottage Grove Road and San Damiano to make things wide enough for a bike path. So we have the sidewalk. It's possible we could expand the sidewalk just in front of San Damiano, but again, then you get back into a narrower part once you get onto the private property at the end of the block. So the city would certainly be responsible, for instance, if we had to, say, widen the entry to San Damiano, to the part, we're talking about a parking lot right down there near Monona Drive, and the city would be responsible for building the parking lot and making sure the access to it meets all the regulations and, you know, what's recommended. But we agree that there definitely is not going to, you know, there's issues with bike access between Cottage Grove Road if you're coming from Madison up to the property, but unfortunately, we don't have any space left to build anything, and I don't know if you're aware, but several years ago, the Wisconsin legislature passed a law that we cannot take property using eminent domain to build sidewalks or bike paths. So we can't, you know, force people to sell us that property so we can build a path either. So we're kind of in a bind. And a lot of those houses, their houses are right there. They don't have any property to sell us. So I don't know if that answers your question, but.
It does. It answers most of it. I'm also concerned about the pedestrians. So their only crosswalks are on the other side of Winnequa and all the way down at Buckeye.
And I'm sorry, I didn't address that. We will be doing something. We're going to have to work with the city of Madison, and of course the county controls Monona Drive also, to build some kind of a crosswalk partway through, and we've talked about putting one of those flashing signals that you can turn on, so hopefully cars stop so you can cross. But we definitely are aware that something needs to be done to make it's safer to cross in that area.
So related to that, sorry to monopolize, if others have questions, please yell out, because I'll give up my questions. No, I won't, I'll just ask them later. So Atwood is 25 miles an hour, Monona Drive is 30 miles an hour. Street design is the reason that cars drive that fast. So we can lower the speed limit, I don't know if that's been discussed at all, lowering the speed limit on at least this part of Monona Drive. But if we don't change the actual design of the street, cars will not go slower. That's how it works.
Well, I think Madison has experienced what lowering the speed limit does, and it really, at a certain point, people just ignore. You know, you could say let's lower it to 15 miles an hour, but people don't drive. If we were to lower it, say, to 25, I think we'd probably have to work with the county and Madison because that road is controlled by all three. What was the other question? No, and I can't, pardon? Oh, road design. I can tell you right now we aren't going to be redesigning the road because Monona just spent millions, Monona, the city of Madison and the county, to rebuild that entire stretch of the road about 10 years ago. And that just isn't going to happen. We have too many other roads that need to be rebuilt, and nobody's going to want it. And we had a lot of federal funding for that, and no one is going to want to just tear up perfectly good roads. So I'm sorry, but we're going to have to do what else we can to make it safer in terms of crossing areas and things like that.
How many years left do you think we have on Monona Drive before it needs to be remodeled?
Oh, about 50 at least.
Okay, dang, I'll probably be dead.
Hi, Mary. Thank you, Mary, and the whole group here for presenting this remarkable master plan, thorough and comprehensive, and I know a lot of work has been put into it. So, as a community member, really appreciate it. I just have a quick comment on the naming and the renaming of the place. Personally, I would not like to see fundraising tied to the naming of it. If you're like me, you've spent time on that property. You've walked it. You sense the spirit of that land. And that goes back to the ancestral grounds of the Ho-Chunk Nation. I would like, I thought I cut out. I would like to see, and sooner than later, it being renamed, and that the Ho-Chunk Nation would have the naming rights to that piece of property.
Thank you.
I just used paper for notes. My name is Jim Searle. A little background, a quick background. I'm a member of the Friends of San Damiano. I'm also a volunteer at the property, and also I've got extensive construction experience. I at one time worked for the state of Wisconsin at Old World, Wisconsin. And if you're not familiar with that, that's an outdoor ethnic museum that facilitates taking down ethnic buildings throughout the state of Wisconsin and restoring them and putting them up on a 566-acre piece of property down by Palmyra. So I also consider myself an environmental preservationist, and having said that, I mean, in different aspects, one being architecture, historic architecture, outdoor environment. And so I, as a volunteer working on the house, pulling hundreds of staples and carpeting and helping out with the restoration, so to speak, the preliminary restoration of the building itself. I also got to of course, see what the inside of the house looks like and how it was laid out, and quite frankly, it's somewhat confusing to me because it's very convoluted layout. The kitchens are not weren't well planned. I'm trying to figure out, well, why? What kind of a home was this for a family? And so I'm sort of conflicted as to, should we save the house for its historic values? Should we tear it down and build new? Because I don't think it's a real pretty house, but I do like the woodwork that's inside of there. And so I would like to at least think that maybe we could, use some of the material, the woodwork inside or something else, if we're not going to save the house. And like I say, I haven't been in construction for a number of years. I know about foundations, I know about roofs, the two things that if you don't have a good foundation and a good roof, you're going to lose your home eventually, or you're going to have problems anyway. So it's just, I guess that's my opinion, and thank you for listening to me.
Well, thank you. And I think if we were to build a new facility, we've talked about definitely trying to save features of the house and reuse. And of course, it isn't going to be a matter of just if we decide to take down the house, we take down the house. It's a Monona city landmark. We have an ordinance that we have to follow. We can't just take it down. There's a whole process through the Landmarks Commission and everything, so it could take quite a while to resolve that question. So, are there any other questions or comments?
Hi, my name's Kathy Carew, and I just have two quick questions. I couldn't tell by this drawing if there's a service road that goes up to the facility.
I can answer that for you. And I'll go over here real quick, and I'll bring you the microphone. But on the plan, we do have, I think Andy had mentioned it, there's paved paths and then there's hard surface paths. So the hard surface paths don't necessarily mean they're concrete or asphalt. But the paved path is this white one that goes up. So in this version, it's a sidewalk, but the sidewalk is wider so that you can drive a vehicle down it, or an ambulance could go down it, or a little service cart could go down it. So we were mindful that people might not be able to walk from that parking lot to the building, but they could get some form of transportation on that walk to get to that building. The other thing about that wider walk is it can become an amenity for the park itself. So if you have, like the beer garden, and you had the food carts could go around that walk. And then as that walk's developed, it could have electricity in it for lights, but the lights might have plug-ins in them, so those food carts can plug into it. So it's a multifaceted access point for the park.
And I don't know if this question's too early, but maybe in the decision-making, if a group was to rent the building and have 100, 150 people, would the rest of the park be closed off, or would be certain areas, or that's it, they just use the building and everything else is open, or not?
I don't think I can answer that definitively right now, but I think we want to keep the rest of the property open as much as possible. I don't think we anticipate closing off all the rest of the property to anybody who would like to use it, because one of our main goals here is to keep it accessible to the public. And indeed,
Mike went, I don't know.
he's fixing something, okay. And that's one of the reasons the county gave us that big grant. One of the main motivations was to make sure that it remains accessible to the public, so.
Anyone else?
I think we have a question.
Hi, I'm a relatively new Monona resident, and I am so thrilled to be here. I think this has been a marvelous process, very open, all the way along. I understood what was going on. I hate the house. I wish it would go away, but that's just me, and maybe it won't. Maybe it'll turn out that there is a reason, although I can't understand what it would be, for keeping the house. But I just want to thank you for all the people involved in the process. And I think that the way you've done this master plan is so beautifully flexible that it's actually rational, as opposed to the Monona waterfront design in Madison.
Well, thank you, and really thank all of you as the community, because you did take the surveys and you did reach out and give us your thoughts. So this is really, it's your ideas. We just put it on paper. So it really goes back to the community.
Anyone else? Doesn't look like it. Well, we'll be hanging around here for a little while. I think we have the area till 8 o'clock. So thank you all for coming, and feel free to send me an email or via the city website, and I can make sure it gets to who else needs to see it. So thank you for coming.